What can the perfect stranger you meet on the pages of a book or on Instagram teach you about yourself and the life you must live? Welcome back to the Uncommodified podcast, my friends, and to another Uncorked conversation. Today, my guest is Justin Marlowe. Justin, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much,
Awesome.
Tim.
This is going to be a blast. We're going to have a great time tonight. Let me introduce to you tonight a man who absolutely intrigues me and inspires me. We've never met physically before, but let me introduce you to my Instagram friend, Justin Marlowe. Here's what I've discovered about Justin in our DMs, our emails, and our 7:38 a.m., that is a.m., not p.m., a.m. telephone call. Justin is a new author
On
on
Thanksgiving
Thanksgiving
Day,
Day, American Thanksgiving.
which is maybe different for people
That's
in
true. That's true. It
Ontario.
wasn't Thanksgiving Day for me, but it was for you. And you answered your phone. You got the ticket, my friend. That was that was awesome. Justin's a new author seeking a publisher and home for his memoir entitled "Perfect Strangers," which combines elements of Black culture, racial strife, mental health, pop culture, history, humor, and a bit of romance into a tale that you will want to read when it finds its way into the crowded world of printed and digital books, and it will. It hasn't yet, but I guarantee you it will.
August
There you go.
2024.
Coming out soon. Justin holds a Bachelor of Arts degree from Virginia Tech and has worked in the public school system for 16 years. He's a budding new author, as I said, with a lot to say. Now, here's my opinion about Justin, and I haven't told Justin I was going to say this. So, Justin, I'm going to share with all my listeners right now what I really think of you. And here's what it is. Justin is bold, he's brave, and he is a bit brash. And this might be why I like him, I think. He is no man's fool, and yet willing to be wise and foolish enough to transcend the din of social media bullshit that I see every day and get my full attention. And Justin, that's why you're on my show. Because, man, I see a lot of bullshit on social media, but I love what you post and the trajectory of how you challenge yourself and others. And that's why we're going to have a drink together and kick off a conversation. So what are we going to drink, my friend?
I got myself a grapefruit and vodka, and you got a. What
Oh,
you
I
got
got
for
myself a
yourself?
gin and tonic. So I went gin and tonic cocktail.
Nice,
Cheers to you,
sir.
my friend.
Cheers to you, sir. And by the way, I really appreciate that introduction. I didn't know you were going to say such endearing words, and I mean that really means a lot, especially coming from people that are an individual that you don't really know personally. But then you do have those moments where, like we talked on
Yep.
the phone. You don't even get that a lot of
Yep.
times in
Mm-hmm.
2023. So,
I know.
I can't say enough about those kind words and your candor. So, like I said, much
Awesome,
appreciated,
and
sir.
this is going to be a lot of fun, and everything I said is absolutely true. I love the fact that you just don't fit in and fall in line, and that's partly why I think we can hit it off here because you are an uncommodified guy, and I try to be again an uncommodified guy. Now, not to the same level as you. Now, listen, if you're watching on the YouTube channel, you will notice that Justin has a little bit more hair than I do, and I am absolutely quite jealous. I am jealous of the dude, man. That's rock star dude. That is awesome.
I appreciate that. Luckily enough, as I've got older, I haven't lost any hair. So, what can I
Awesome.
say?
Well, you know what? People are going to check out the YouTube channel after listening to the podcast just for that to see your hair. This is awesome. All right, listen.
Hey, whatever. Look, if that's what it
Whatever.
was, if that makes me
Yeah.
blow up, then hey,
Hey,
I'm
fair
taking
enough.
it.
I'll
You know what
take
I'm
it.
saying?
I'm gonna take your hair and I'm gonna put it on myself. That would be an awesome podcast too. Okay, my friend, let's get.
That would look really
I know it
fucking
would be
weird,
fucking weird,
Tim.
so we better not do that. Well, not today, anyways. Okay, listen, let's get into this. Stop the shenanigans, although they probably continue a bit later. So, listen, what drove you to decide to write? Okay, you are writing some poetry. You're writing this. You got this book you've written. What drives Justin to say, "I want to express myself in writing"? What's the journey here?
The journey is realizing that I think that I have something to say. So, and I use that term "think" like
Yeah.
that literally. It's like I think I have something to say. So why not give it a try? Put some words together, see how it reads to me personally. Because you're going to be your own worst critic. I mean, at least in
Mm-hmm.
my case. So then, if I do that, and if it reads well to me, then I think that I have
Mm.
something. And it's kind of as simple as that. There are tertiary issues that occur when it comes to that. There's other things like, am I happy in my current state?
Mm.
Am I fulfilled in my current state? Would I be happier if I could become, a professional writer? And, if so, why not give it a legitimate
Mm.
shot? So that's what I did. I just started writing, and I had this story that I had been wanting to tell for years. And it is the story, the memoir of Perfect Strangers, that I wanted to tell for a long, long time. And I never really thought about it. I always thought it would play out better
Mm.
visually in like a cinematic portrayal because I never gave myself the credit to actually write it. I didn't give myself the credit as a writer. So initially, I wrote a treatment. I want to say like a two-page treatment that was intended to be submitted to um, film studios. And the only feedback I got was, you should write a book. You should write a book. You should
Mm.
write a book. So I was like, well, I've never done it before, but let me go ahead and just give this a whirl and see how it goes. And then, I came up with a introductory paragraph that I really thought was captivating. I came up with some words. I mean, sometimes I sit around at night and I watch documentaries and I get inspiration from certain terminology and certain phrases and certain scenes that might play into what I want to say. So then, like right then and there, in that moment, I was like, well, shit, I'm going to borrow from that right
Huh.
there. That fits what I'm doing. So I'm going to borrow from that phrase. I'm not going to plagiarize it or copy it, but I'm going to borrow some emotion from that phrase. I'm going to borrow some of the candor of that phrase and put it into what I'm doing. And slowly but surely, it was like I had 60, 70 pages done. And then at that point, it was like, well, why don't you finish
Mm.
this?
Mm.
And so then I mean, then I kept moving, kept going with it, and now I am here today.
You know what I love about it? It's just the ease that you're talking about. And of course there's a lot of work involved in these projects, of course. But what I like about it is you just say, you know what? I think I want to do this. I what's the barrier? And that's one of the great gifts I think of living in the time that we do. The reality is all of us can choose to do lots of things that we never could 100 years ago, 50 years ago, maybe even 40 years ago. And so we have choices available to us. And I actually believe that what you're saying, Justin, is so true, is that so many people, they say they want to do shit, but they just don't do it. They have all the excuses of why they can't and why they won't and why it shouldn't or
Right.
why it won't work. But the reality is, until you actually put some work into it and throw it into the universe, throw it out into the cosmos for it to figure itself out almost, it is nothing really happens. And so I love just this sort of, I would say even almost this naivety around, you know what? I can do it. Why don't I do it? I should do it. I wrote this. Then I wrote
Oh, you're
this.
so right. And when you say naivety, you're hitting the nail on the head with that because I was totally naive. I didn't know anything about
Yep.
publishing at all. I had no idea about the literary genre I'm sorry,
Mm-hmm.
discipline of entertainment, I guess. I had no clue. But I didn't care because I just thought if the story is
Mm-hmm.
good, then if my writing's not bad, then I have
Mm-hmm.
something. And if the story's good and my writing's
Mm-hmm.
good, then there's no reason why this shouldn't, become something very
Mm-hmm.
successful. And then once I started to realize that my writing was good, and that's just initially it was my own intuition that said that. And then I started giving it to beta writers, individuals who didn't know anything about me or knew very little, who could just look at like a few paragraphs here and there and just say, hey, does this read professionally? Does this read like someone who
Yep.
should be in the industry? Or does it read like someone who's an amateur, like a high school kid who doesn't really care about writing? Um, and I always got positive feedback from that. So when that occurred, I didn't see any reason why I should hold back from pursuing this entity as something that could be a very successful project.
Again, if you're listening in, Justin, I really am struck by this. And I use the word naivety. I think a lot of people see that as a problem. I think you understand what I mean by naivety. It's this childlike wonder. Naivety is a powerful force. It's sort of the thing that my grandkids have when they look at the universe, they look at their world with endless possibilities and promise. They haven't experienced a lot of pain and hurt in their life, which is wonderful, which obviously jades us. But when you're young, you have this naivety where you just don't know what you don't know, and therefore you're carefree. You're free of care because of that. And I often look at my grandkids and I see that wonderful naivety, and I want to find that again, that balance. We want to be, we don't want to be childish, but we want to be childlike in this way. And I love that childlike wonder just in this part of this conversation where you're just like, you know what? I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to find my way and I'm going to figure it out. And so again, if you're listening, maybe you're just overthinking, overcomplicating the thing that is in your mind that you say, I want to do it. Maybe you just need to strip it back for a second and look at it like my grandkids do and look at it with great potential and possibility as Justin's looking at his journey with writing and finding his way. And, I have read some pieces of Justin's work, both that which has been posted on Instagram and things, and Justin sent me a piece. And I'll tell you something, there is just this wonderful, it's got this power and real sort of grip to it, but there's a poetic, almost sort of cadence to the way that you write in the things that I've read that you write. It's almost like, in some ways, as I read it, it's almost got this melody to it. There's a melody or a harmony or something that's happening in the writing, which I find very, very powerful. And of course, you're bringing then into this character set. You've got different characters that are coming along. So I got a question for you. Who are the most inspirational figures in your story? So this is a memoir, so it's got some probably some license within the story, but at the same time you've got these characters. So who have been the most inspirational figures in the story you wrote, but also in the story of Justin's life?
Well, the most influential, which I didn't even know going into it that this was going to be the case, and it might sound like a little bit cliche, but my father, who, in a literal sense, he and I had a kind of a contentious relationship, I guess you could say. Um, but when writing about moments that stood out to me in my life, I recognized some of the significant impact that some of the moments that I could recall, like that, like things that I would never and will never forget. And those moments were moments that, like I said, will never be forgotten for me. And they incorporated stories that I felt needed to be told. Whether or not you or anyone else personally cares about them, I think they would connect to someone. And if they can connect to one person, they can connect to a million people. You just got to find your niche. So that the connection to my father was the most impactful. I also realized some of my shortcomings as I grew up. Things that I was okay to write about that I did incorrectly, did wrong. Perspectives that I might have internalized from a negative standpoint that were problematic and that might have hurt me as an adolescent. Realizing those things, even now, helps me because it's like, oh, well, I wouldn't have known that had I not sat down and wrote about it.
Interesting. So you found sort of a bit of a cathartic journey. You found, as you wrote about things in your life, you found a different vantage point to view those things from, and actually found some.
Absolutely.
You found some learning. something you could actually draw out of a circumstance in your life. As you reflect on it in writing, you start seeing it. You almost take a It's almost like you take a different vantage point. And I know this from my own writing at times, where it's like you're experiencing something, and then when you write about it, it's almost like you become an observer. As you write about it, you become an observer of the experience. And as you become an observer, as you tell it, because you're telling it both internally and externally, somehow the dynamic changes. And I found this in my own writing at times. And it's interesting that what you're seeing here is that you're observing that in a different way, and you're gaining a different appreciation both for your own experience, your father's experience. I know you write about your grandparents, and what, again, you write very provocatively, quite candidly, and there's this humor about your writing, but there is just such truth in there. I remember reading something you sent me about your grandparents' relationship, and talking about that, and your relationship to them as a child, and your growing up in sort of this amalgam of this, the culture you come from, the black culture you're in, the church culture that's part of your family heritage, and how it all comes together and gets a little bit sticky. And I think, Justin, the story you've written, although it is your story, it's the story of many people, I think. As I sort of have read bits and pieces of it, I think people are going to find themselves in your story. Of course, it's your story, but as they read it, it becomes part of how they look at that. And I think that's really quite amazing. So here's a question. What did you learn about yourself in doing this that maybe you wouldn't have? And what is life teaching you even now as you've got this thing, and you're trying to shop it now. You're trying to sell it. You're trying to get a publisher, and you've got some initial conversations going, which is kind of exciting. But what lessons did you learn in the process, and what are you learning even now as you almost contend to birth this thing into the natural world that you're trying to carry? You have this sense of pregnancy. You've got something you want to birth into the
Right.
world. How does it feel, and what are you learning along the way?
Well, one thing I mainly learned was about the nature of expression from my point of view. I learned a lot about the need within myself to express. I enjoy every bit of the writing process, even the editing process, and the stuff that people. I'm not saying anyone, everybody, but I'm saying like a lot of people might not be like, they might like want to write it and be like, okay, I'm done, But I enjoy going back and looking over stuff and editing and then re-editing and then picking apart the grammar and the lines and doing things that someone who might be hired to do this stuff would do, because it's it's such a part of who I am. And each little part of it is a part of the creative process. And I enjoy every part of the creative process. So I really took to heart my appreciation for that. I've done it before in the past in other with other creative endeavors, but with writing, because it's so you, and it's so like you said those things that which were beautifully said and extremely flattering, about my writing and how it affects other people, but that's how I express myself. So doing it, appreciating it for myself, and realizing that, hey, others feel a certain way when they read what you're writing. Like that's impactful for me. That encourages me to keep doing it every single day. So that's the biggest thing that I learned. There's so many other ancillary parts that come with it, because you're, at least in this situation, it's a memoir. So then you're, speaking about individuals who are close to you. You're speaking about sometimes family members, friends, and it can kind of put you in a position to psychoanalyze where you were in other points in your life. And the goal that I'm trying to put forth is to tell you the story from that perspective of that kid. But I can't discount the fact that I'm not that kid today. So you're going to get some of the adult with the perspective of the kid. Like when I mention what it was like to grow up during I know you're in Canada, so man, I don't know if people, but like during David Duke's gubernatorial run in Louisiana, he was a Klan member and he ran for governor and he almost won. So I'm 9 at the time, and every single day I go to school, every kid is talking about David Duke.
Wow.
And either you are a supporter or you're a hater. And there were fights, there were name calling every day. At the time, I'm just kind of like, whoa, this is really freaking weird. Now my perspective is different looking back on it. And so there are those times when you can go back and forth and I guess superimpose your modern day perspective on yourself as a child, and that does reflect in how you write about it. But one of my goals is to still give you like the majority perspective as me as a child.
Yeah. Yeah. By the way, if you're listening on the podcast and you just heard a bark, that's my dog. Somebody to bring the doorbell upstairs. I'm downstairs in my studio, and my dog's on the rampage upstairs. Someone will take care of him. So if you hear the dog, it's Jackson, the dog. He gets in the podcast every once in a while. It doesn't. As you say that, it just dawns on me. There's almost seems like there's a therapeutic part of this process that you've experienced, in the sense that you're writing these things, you're going back with the wisdom you have now and the perspective you have now. You're going back and you're writing from the place of being that 9-year-old boy, and you're entering into the story as much as possible as that 9-year-old boy, but you're bringing a longer term trajectory and wisdom and experience, because you know the end of the story. You know where that little boy is now, and you know that you might be writing from the vantage point where the election isn't over yet, and the boy doesn't know what's
Right.
going to happen. But now you see it with the longer term trajectory. And so I would imagine there must be a cathartic and maybe even therapeutic part of writing this way, writing a memoir. I know for me, in the book that I've written, that I released last October, there's parts of it where I tell some stories of my childhood and a little bit about my learning along the way. And I will say, as I did it, there was an interesting way where I almost felt like I was going back and sort of looking at things in the language I would use, like an empathetic observer, not a victim of the circumstance that I was talking about anymore, but an empathetic observer of myself and others in the situation. And I found that actually quite therapeutic. Did you find this process as you did this? Did you find it therapeutic, or does that not really resonate with you?
Oh no, the therapeutic element is super strong. That absolutely. The empathy side, I do tackle that when it comes to others, and I do tackle how if I, screwed up or had a perspective that maybe I would frown upon today, that's empathy in itself. When I, making reference to that, and I do that within the memoir. I do kind of pull sometimes the situation at hand that I'm writing about out of where it is and into the current space. I make sure not to do it too much so that it does feel like a legitimate memoir. So it's not like, so you don't get too much back and forth, but it's definitely part of it. But I would say the therapeutic nature is completely at hand. I would say like just very eye opening for me as a creator, and I mean that's not just with this piece, but anything I write is therapeutic. Like if I just am sitting in my bedroom at 3 a.m. and something comes to my brain, and I just put it together in like a notepad, and then I, like a little piece of creative nonfiction that's like a little bit poetic, like that kind of thing. Those are such freeing moments that I never really had before, but I also never explored it, So exploring it, so taking that plunge we talked about initially was the initiator for me to be able to feel these therapeutic elements like now consistently.
It's interesting, and I would say I think this is what attracted me in the beginning to your posts on Instagram. I have lots of different people I follow, but meaning I follow in sort of with air quotes, but very few people I actually follow. Where I when I get up in the morning, and I get up quite early, I'm looking for a few posts, and I would say, Justin, yours
Hmm.
is one of them. And it's interesting for me because sometimes it seems to me like you've just written a small little vignette clearly, and you're playing with an idea, and it's quite poetic, and it's both forthright but complex. I love the interplay. It's very powerful, and you write in a way that's very emotive in what I believe. When I read what you write, there's an emotion that tr- really translates to me, at least, in a very powerful way. What's interesting to me is, like, Justin, let's be honest. You and I, we're different. We're very different individuals. We come from different places. I'm
That's okay.
correct.
That's great. That's great.
We don't have a lot of quote commonality, but where the commonality is coming from, where the communing is coming from, at least from my perspective, in our connection through Instagram and now in the podcast, is that there's something very emotive in your writing that I identify with. And there's been times where you've written something, and I know that you're talking about your story, but actually I see myself in that story. And as I see myself in that story and I can self identify, it causes me to think about things. And so I just want to say to you, I really appreciate what you're doing and what you're putting out to the world, because it's a vulnerable place. When you surrender your shit to the world, there's a lot of people who are total assholes out there who just say shit because they can. And it can be tough when you surrender yourself and your soul and your heart to this great thing called the social, because people sometimes don't always treat that with the kind of care and compassion that they ought to. And so I just want to say I really do appreciate your expression. And you're in this place again where you're wrestling and you're contending for something. You've got this memoir, you've written it, you're starting to have some conversation with publishers, you've got some conversation that might have some life on it. You just don't know where it's going to go. And yet you've got this tremendous belief and faith, and it's sort of, whether it's karma or destiny or fate, I don't know how you see all this, but you're a man who is still in the process of making it happen, but you have a deep confidence, and frankly I do too, that it will happen. Now, here's the thing I would say: when you get famous, please don't forget me, okay? Like, don't forget me along the way. You got this old white friend up here in Canada, and I'm not going away until I die. So don't forget me when you get famous, and then you get your screenplay and all that other shit happens. Don't forget me, Justin.
Nah, Tim, we're all look. You can call me
Yeah,
anytime. We're always going to be able to do a
yeah.
podcast. We'll link
There you
up,
go.
even if it don't matter, man. It's all
Even if
good.
it's 7:38 on Christmas Day. No, how about Thanksgiving Day?
I don't give a
You
shit
don't give a
what day.
That's awesome.
It's
That's awesome.
it's
And
fine.
listen, if you're listening in again, you're listening for a reason. And ask yourself, what are you contending for? What do you need to get out on paper? What do you need to do that you always said you wanted to do? Paint, write, speak, dance, do whatever you need to do to be creative and express yourself. Surrender it to the world. See where it goes. If it goes nowhere, it doesn't matter, because then you've done it at least and you've found your way through it. So let me ask you, let's take the conversation a bit of a different direction right now. So you've got 16
Let me
years.
give you one more
Oh,
a little piece of information,
you
Tim.
go
I'm
ahead,
sorry.
man.
I just wanted to say, like, when it comes to all the things you were saying, one thing that is very important is that there is fear. There's an element of fear
Mm-hmm.
involved, and I have the fear. I have the fear every time that I write or post something. There's a little bit of fear involved, but I have to get to a point, and I think I've gotten there, but it's a struggle every day with getting to the point where you don't care what other people think, because this is your life, your expression, your tool to emote,
Hmm.
and if someone, I mean, obviously I'm not speaking about emotive aspects that are like blatantly offensive
No,
or designed to harm,
no.
but if they're intrinsic within you
Yep.
and you emote them, You got nothing to be scared of anymore. But it takes time. You have to do it 5, 10, 15, 20 times before it gets to that point.
Yeah.
Um, so I just wanted to point that out. I'm sorry
Yeah.
to
No, hey,
interrupt you,
listen,
but yeah, I mean, I
don't
wanted
be
to say
sorry.
that.
Lots of my guests interrupt me, so I'm good with that, and I liked it because we needed to hear that. And by the way, I would say that brings up a point that just sometimes you got to do it scared. I mean, that's the way we're doing it scared most days, and I do it scared too. And I think there's a lot of
If
wisdom
you're
in that.
not scared, then you're probably not doing something impactful.
Yeah, that's correct. If it doesn't scare you, then you are not pushing yourself. That is 100% true. So, hey,
I mean, think about what individuals would have done in other eras of,
yeah,
I mean, I can't speak on everything, but, like advancing human rights forward, speaking out against, like major corporations, speaking out against, um, like the Western European power structure, speaking out
hmm
against, like in the United States, like the slave system, things like that. These things are hard to do. Sometimes I'm like, man, I don't know if I would have been able to do that. I'm not saying I wouldn't, but I'm like, I kind of have it easy. I just gotta sit on social media, type up something that I feel, write it, and put it out. Like that's kind of not even in a comparative sense. It's not even on the same playing field.
right.
So if I can't do what I want to do, then I got a problem.
Yeah, you know what? You're right.
Because
And
those individuals could do,
yeah,
they could do things, you know, that had like far more like implications of grandeur, if you will, or even the risk reward factor would have been like crazy different. The differential would be ridiculous.
yeah,
So
yeah. Well,
I
Justin,
gotta put
that's very
myself in
helpful.
those shoes at
That's a good
times.
reminder. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good reminder because you're right. The context of our lives is very different, and we stand on the shoulder of giants, right? That got us here and got us where we are, and gave us the freedom that we have to express ourselves, or we wouldn't have it. So it's a great reminder for sure. So, listen, just as we finish up, just a quick window into your other world. You taught you were in the public school system for 16 years. I know that you did some work with people with disabilities. Just one question about that. So, what's the one thing you learned about yourself by doing that you wouldn't have that experience?
Um, Increased levels of overall empathy.
Mm,
When I was much younger, I struggled with empathy. I think I probably still do, but in those situations, it really helped me gain like I would say a stronger empathetic perspective, a stronger perspective for differentiation in terms of like learning styles,
mm,
how individuals internalize certain things, certain just anything at all. So that was the primary, I would say, benefit that I gained internally from that process.
mm. So deeper levels of empathy.
It'll never go away.
Yep.
It only increases because even now, like I have friends who have students or and and children who have certain needs that are different from maybe the norm. And as a friend, as a comrade, as a anything that involves whatever relationship that you are intertwined with, you kind of you have to continue with that empathetic process. And I would have never grasped that the way that I did had I not had that experience working with special needs children.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. I appreciate that. I just want a little window into that piece of your life. So listen, let's bring the conversation in for a landing here. Being an uncommodified podcast, and you're an uncommodified kind of dude, I always want to ask my guests as we finish up this question. So, when Justin is walking into a room and you're bringing the thing that only Justin can bring because you're a unique individual with unique contributions, and you're coming into a room and you're making a positive benefit to the people in that room. What's the unique contribution that you usually find yourself bringing into that room that sort of has that special Justin on it?
I don't want this to sound cliche, but I'm bringing the notion of literal one of one. If you want something from a literary perspective, if you want something to sell, something literary in a cinematic realm, if you want any perspective whatsoever, then I am probably going to give you the only perspective that I can give you, which gives me the opportunity and the pleasure of broaching a situation with that guy is not like everybody else. That could hurt at times. Sometimes people want you to be like everybody else. And in some industries, that's okay. But, well, not even industries, in some situations, that's okay. But me, this is where I've sort of taken more of the that embracing element even to writing is I don't want to write like everybody else. I'm not going to try to write differently than somebody else. I'm just going to give you what I give you. I read, I see what others write. I can appreciate a lot of things. But at the same time, when I put my hands to the keyboard, I'm going to give you something that is very much intrinsic when it comes from me. And that's what I think and I hope resonates with others. Even, whether it's social media posts, musical choices, like those they're artistic too. Those are artistic endeavors. What you put forth to the world that stems from your inner core, that's art. That's your art. It doesn't matter if it's drawn, written, painted. It's still your art. It's your brain. It's your brain going into the stratosphere. And that's what I hope to be able to give when it comes to that individualistic element that nobody else can give.
Appreciate that. So when you're walking in a room, you're bringing.
If that makes sense.
I love it. One of one. You are one of one walking into a room, and you're looking to not be a dime a dozen kind of person, not just fit in for the sake of fitting in. You're going to bring that unique contribution that you have, whether it's in a creative art form, whether it's in an empathetic type of conversation with somebody, whether it's a perspective maybe on somebody's life that you need to bring, or in this case maybe even a re-understanding or reinterpreting of your past as you give the narrative of it and bring it forth. And you know what? That's a gift. And I think, I would just challenge everybody that is listening, whether you write a book or not, when I suggest, go back and get a new narrative on an old story in your life would be very helpful. Because sometimes we got to rewrite those stories and we got to bring them into a different thing. And whether you write a book or you write them down on paper, we need to rewrite the stories of our past. We need to visit ourselves there and rewrite them in a more empathetic way for ourselves and others. Powerful conversation, Justin. Really appreciate it. And so quickly, how can people connect with you? Is Instagram the best?
Yeah, it's certainly the most easy way to get in touch with me. So if you are out there and you want to follow me. It's just J Marlowe Writes, JMarlowewrites on Instagram. If you send me a DM, you can follow me, comment on a post. I really relish in anyone who wants to engage in some positive, constructive dialogue, podcasting. Tim, I really hope that we can do this again. Obviously we're at different stages in our careers, but hey, to come back at some point, rehashing things, I think would be beautiful.
Yep. Well, we're going to do it, and we're going to do it when you get your book published, which you will. We're going to do it again, and even if it takes a while, we're going to do it again before that. Listen, Justin, really appreciate this, and I appreciate you coming on the show.
I told you, August 2024.
It's a different conversation than I typically have. Okay, I know you got a date. You got a date, man. It's like a ring and a date. You're on this. You're on this like a coyote on a crippled chicken. I love it. You're making it happen. So again, let me just remind you.
There's not going to be any win.
Go ahead.
No, there's not going to be any win anymore. It's August 2024.
I know it's not going to be a when, it's going to be in August, so we're going to make it happen. My friend, thank you so much for your time. Listen, if you listened in, you listened for a reason. Do me a favor, DM me on social media or send me an email. That's sort of old school, but email at tim@theuncommodified.com if you want to email me and let me know what you're doing with this conversation. Again, remember, the goal of these conversations is to provoke your thinking, to ask you to ask yourself some great questions, and to live differently for the sake of others, for the positive benefit for you and for them. Have a great day. Cheers, my friends.